Okay.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome once again to another episode of Mondays with Maishi. It is Monday night, now just a bit after 9 o'clock here on October 9th, 2023. We are well into our third year of Mondays with Maishi. And it's exciting to have everybody back after just a short few-week hiatus since the holidays. And it's unfortunate that we have to do this talk tonight. Obviously, I'm referring to, in light of what's going on in Israel with many of, at least us Orthodox Jewish people or Jewish people who have friends, relatives down in the Middle East who are struggling right now with a full-out war. And I actually did not have something scheduled tonight for Mondays with Maishi. I was going to resume next week, but in light of what's happening, I decided there's something really important for all of us to take away, especially us clinicians. So this is really a clinical discussion for clinicians, mental health professionals, and I'm seeing from the participation that it's obviously something that many of us feel will benefit from, and are yearning and craving for this information. So I really appreciate Dr. Ben Goldman for agreeing last minute to join us tonight, changing some things around in his schedule. So thank you, Ben. And Dr. Goldman, welcome. Just before we get started with tonight's conversation and topic, I do want to acknowledge that tonight's discussion is very interesting in the sense that this is something that not only will many of our clients be struggling with as we resume back into the therapy room from the holidays, but of course many of our clients, many of us will have clients who are returning from Israel, and that's not to neglect the fact that many of us also have family and relatives and friends, and maybe even some of us have recently returned. I know my own parents were actually in Israel until Friday, and they came back Friday morning from Israel. So literally the day before the war broke out, the day before the attacks came, they landed back in the United States. And of course, I do have nieces and cousins and nephews and all that in Israel myself. So this is something that's not only exclusive for the people we're going to be treating, but what's unique about it is that it also is something that's touching most of us on a very personal way. So, I guess part of what we're going to discuss tonight is the personal versus professional element, and how do we, first of all, how do we keep our personalness out of it and remain neutral and blank slated and professional, or do we somehow tap into and utilize the personalness that's happening without obviously over identifying, but somehow use that the self to be able to touch our client's experience. So Dr. Goldman, tell us a little bit about who you are and why it is that I reached out to you or connected with you of all people in this time of crisis. What's your background, and how do you get to crisis talk and processing and debriefing?
Well, first of all, thank you, Moshe, for giving me this opportunity. It's, I guess I'll say what I'm going to say by way of answering the question. The way I've always kind of found myself in situations like this is looking to be a part of, okay, so how are we getting through this? How are we helping each other? I've been a school psychologist for about almost 15 years, and this last year, and this current year is my second year not being in a school. And one of the really intense experiences maybe that led up to me eventually kind of growing up and finally graduating 8th grade was it was a very difficult 5 years. We had a really beloved principal who happened to have been my own principal at a different elementary school a long time ago, Rabbi David Kamenetsky, who was the kids who couldn't make it in the classroom and who were always getting sent out, his office was really their place. And he had Parkinson's disease and fell down the stairs one morning suddenly and died. And I was this new, to that school at least, school psychologist, and something magical happened. People just showed up. We called Norman Blumenthal, who I now work with at the OL trauma team, but all these parents who were psychologists, colleagues, some of them were there at school before I got there. Some of them are calling. And it really made such a difference for me, that feeling of somebody has me. And so just another teacher, COVID, I had a trauma in my own life with a medical issue with one of my children. And so when I left school, that was something really that I really wanted to continue. And so Norman Blumenthal asked me to join them at the OHEL trauma team. And so what we do is we do bereavement, pre-bereavement support for traumatic loss, disasters, crises, working with schools and things like that. And so one thing that I really connect with all of the people on this call with is that feeling of, it's a very different experience to be going through something when we are privileged to be able to be the vessel, to be, what we would call the cleat, to be able to contain an experience. The Rav Moshe Weinberger, for many of us know who he is, but for those who don't, he's a very celebrated speaker and a role model. And he describes the way that we understand the sukkah. The word sukkah comes from a word that means to look. And you look up, you have to see the schach, you have to see the covering, because you're able to see in the distance, and really being able to be that comfort for somebody else, or be able to be in a position where, I'm not actually going to be able to change this for you. This is something that happened and it's awful. But we together can look to a place where this is not the thing that's happening. This is part of our lives. And so that is all something very special. At the same time, a lot of times when I'm working in the community, what that means is that the situations that I'm dealing with, either they are people that I know and that I care about personally, or it's a situation that affects me. And I think that for a lot of us, this particular situation is really difficult to think about from a clinical perspective, because we're already wearing a hat when it comes to this situation, and so trying to put our clinician's hat on, there's not as much room, or how exactly do we do this? So I had two goals for this, or maybe they're both leading to the same thing. One, that I wanted to be able to share things that I've learned that I think could be helpful, but also to facilitate that and just to have a sense of what the people here, I'd imagine most of the people who signed on are kind of, there might be particular things that you have in mind when you saw this and thought this might be a helpful thing. And also to have an opportunity just to kind of connect with each other around this. People here might have something also that they are bringing to this in terms of experience or insight. So later in the discussion, that'll be something that I look forward to hearing. But
yeah, I just a couple of housekeeping things before we continue. First of all, I wanted to announce, as always, that Mondays with Moshe is sponsored by OKclarity.com for those of us clinicians who would like to share with the world some of the things that we do, I would encourage you to check out OKclarity.com, and you can create a profile. I have my own profile. It's basically a website with orthodox providers, not necessarily mental health professionals, also coaches and nutritionists and other forms, that are kind of related to the mental health profession. So again, I would encourage you to go on, take a look at it, and it might be worth your while to create an account with them so that you can share with the world what it is that you do and promote your message, and hopefully get some marketing out of it too. The other couple of things is, for those of you who could turn on your videos, we always appreciate seeing people. It's very helpful. It gives us great feedback and makes it more personal and interactive. And for those who may have joined tonight, I see there's many new names who I haven't seen before. I'm sure many of you are mental health professionals, and welcome, and we hope you sign up. You could send me an email at mnormanlcsw@gmail.com, and I will sign you up to Mondays with Maishi so you can get the weekly flyer and the weekly recording. And I would ask that if there's anybody on here tonight who is not a mental health professional and wants to join for learning purposes, I'm just going to ask. I was not expecting a turnout of this size, of this magnitude, and did not open it up to more than 100 people. So we're now at the 100 mark. And for someone who, if you're not a mental health professional, I would ask you to please just drop out for tonight, and you can find this recording tomorrow, or either late tonight, probably tomorrow, on YouTube. You can shoot me an email. I'll send you the direct link. It's open to everybody, but for the purpose of tonight's call, I would appreciate just leaving the lines open for members of the mental health community who will hopefully learn something tonight that they'll be able to help on a more macro level for those people who need mental health intervention and might be able to benefit from a mental health professional. If you're a student or mental health professional, please stay here. If you're not in the mental health field and just here for educational purposes, please, again, I'm asking you, make room for the mental health professionals, and I will get you the recording. You can email me, or you can check it out tomorrow on YouTube, or get it from your LMHP. That's local mental health provider. I just made that one up. Lastly, tonight I wanted really specifically to invite everybody to please raise your hand by using the reactions tab on the bottom of the screen. I appreciate that Ben is gracious and humble enough to allow others to chime in. This is not necessarily going to be his show where he gets to teach and everybody gets to learn. It's really a group discussion. I'm sure there's many people in this room right now who have personal and professional experience in the area of trauma. And again, I'm going to ask you to please raise your hand, share, and let's knock our heads together so we can all benefit as much as we can, so that we can treat those coming in with, whether it's traumas or small traumas or just anxieties or fears over what's been going on with their own selves, families, or loved ones. Again, this was prompted by a text message that I got from a friend of mine who said, right now we're stranded in Israel. We don't know how we're going to get back. We were there for the holidays, and please just do me a favor, reserve some time for us when we get back. My family would like to sit down and have a conversation of, just to debrief and talk about some of the things that we experienced, even though it was only air raid sirens and we didn't see any rockets or feel any rumbling or anything like that, but we're scared and we need help. So that's really what prompted this call. So again, please, by all means, raise your hand, and it's open to everybody if you have what to share and if you have a question. So without further ado, let's jump in. Ben, can we start with that question, or did you want to share something else before?
No, yeah, let's go straight to the questions.
Okay, so let's start off with that just very intense question, which is for so many of us, this is so personal. Probably for all of us, this is personal. I know somebody just put it in the chat box. I don't know if it was a direct chat or not, but I'm an Israeli. I hope this can be helpful to me. I'm an Israeli. I think she said I'm in America. Oh yeah, LCSW New York, Israeli, hoping to be helpful. So here we have an Israeli, who is probably Shirley. Thank you, Shirley. But probably this is something that's very personal, and also an LCSW, so it's also professional. How do we balance, how much we share, how much we let on? Should we remain grounded and very objective, and really try as much as we can to keep our own challenges at, or should we sort of share and be in the pain with the client, but then at risk of having over-identification occur, having the client feel responsible to take care of us? How do we balance that? How do we navigate that? And if we do need to stay objective, how do we do that when we're really struggling?
Yeah, yeah. So, the question itself is a challenging one, and then, being able to actually go and do the things that, be in the way that will be most helpful is challenging. So, I think the first part of this is being aware for ourselves of just what our experience is of being in that moment. Some of this is really going to be, game time decision, being able to, if I'm able to be present and grounded enough to make room for my emotional experience, then that for most of us, I think that there is room to be able to really be present with that, and have that really inform our authentic presence in that space. I've found with people who have experienced loss, the only real way to actually do that and be there in that emotional space with them is to just kind of allow yourself to have those feelings be there. And when you're dealing with something that's just really, really awfully sad, that's a reality. And, when I'm crying, they seem to think it's normal. I think that there's a little bit of a danger here, especially, so close to the experience, when somebody's coming to us to be able to process something that they've gone through. The things that we're going to be bringing emotionally to that aren't really necessarily their stuff. I think really it's about being able to kind of, if we're resonating with what they're bringing to us because it's real for us, because it's Eretz Yisrael, because it's our family, because all the reasons why this is something that applies to both of us together, then yeah, that's important within the bounds of being generally regulated and being able to kind of come back to where you need to be clinically available.
It's
But I think
interesting.
yeah,
Go ahead.
I think it's something that really requires paying attention to moment by moment.
Yeah, and that's probably the key. I was going to say, it's interesting. On the one hand, if you let your guard down that much, you obviously become very vulnerable and can't be present enough to hold the client. And on the flip side, if you're actually struggling and really covering that up, it can actually come across as disingenuous. So, there is that balance of being able to hold the client, but not getting too drawn into your own world of pain. And as I think about it, there's always that, excuse me, that question, sort of philosophical question. Can I treat someone who's struggling with something that I never struggled with, right? And I think that that's really where empathy comes in. We have to be able to tap in to the closest emotions that we have, or the emotions that we have that the client is experiencing. So it doesn't have to have been the same circumstance or scenario that we experienced that they had, and it never will be, because frankly, even if they're struggling with a loss or divorce or something tragic, and we struggled with something that seems the same, but our experiences are different. So the best we can do is really just tap in and touch that emotion. And that's really what empathy is, as I understand it.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. If we're trying to be too clinically tough and strong, they know that this is bothering us. But also being able to be curious enough about their experience it's easy when we're identifying with what they're going through, to make assumptions about what things were like and to overly project our own things. So that's something else that I would caution.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm actually wondering if anybody here has any thoughts on that. If you've experienced this and how you balance the dichotomy of struggling and allowing yourself to feel without going too far into it, and also how do you regulate those emotions when they come up. And again, I'm asking and imploring for all non-mental health professionals to please just respect the call for the mental health professionals and drop off the call, because there's a number of mental health professionals who are texting me and messaging me that they are not able to get into the call because we're over the 100 mark. So please, if you can, I promise you'll get to see the recording afterwards. Okay, let's take a comment or question from Chana Sherman, past presenter. Hi, Chana.
Hello. So I just wanted to share that I came into I run a group at our intensives on Tuesday, Mondays, and they also knew that our boss is in Israel, and so I was expecting a lot of worry when I came into the group, and kind of preparing for that mentally, as well as my mitigating my own response and being there and present. And I was surprised, while we did spend some time with it, how quickly they needed and wanted to spend time on why they're there and on Yontif and coming into, not having therapy for a week. And so that was a really interesting thing, like realizing that for me, like maybe I wanted to spend more time on it partially, and that they were not there. Yeah. So that was something really interesting.
Ben?
So it sounds like you were able to occupy that space of just enough in it or out of it to be able to see where you were.
Yeah. And it sort of seamlessly moved from their grief and working through that to working on, their anxiety and stress related to Yontif and not related, to what had happened.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wonder, it sounds like those were all people who were in the United States. And it's just coming, that's, when Moshe was describing the kind of the question, debriefing people who were in Eretz Yisrael. I wonder, I've had a couple of people today bring it up. My kids are talking about it. It might be something that people generally have on their mind. But has anybody here had people today bring up?
Oh, no doubt, I'm sure. Yep. Okay. Well, thank you. Let's talk to Zizi. Go ahead.
Okay, hi. So I did have, actually, it wasn't the client that I spoke to today, but a friend of mine who's stuck there in Israel, who's actually heard the sirens, felt the boom and saw the explosion. It was terrifying. But I do have a young and an older client who's there now, stuck there, and as soon as they come back, we'll have a hard time with them. Now, I'm not expecting them to speak about it or to, I'm going to meet them where they are. I believe that's the right thing, but I'd love to hear feedback. Not always are they ready to say, like as Hannah said, it depends on, do they want to talk to, do they want to meet me at the place of fear? We're not sure about that. I'm gonna stop now because I have a baby here, but thanks for sharing.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay. So that's an interesting point. In other words, you're what I'm hearing you say, I think, is you're going to let them lead the session and come in where they're at and not push anything. Well, that's a very important point.
Yeah, I wonder if there'd be a difference between how you would approach it with kids or with adults. I feel like with an adult, it's kind of just a casual question. With a kid, there's no such thing. Why'd you talk about the thing I didn't want to talk about?
I think it's fair, not to assume that everyone is so deeply affected necessarily. I think my question more is focusing on those who are coming in, not necessarily highly traumatized, but more shaken and just need a debriefing, which maybe we'll talk about more about soon. But let's take some more of the questions and comments. And thank you everyone for raising your hands and participating. Malka, go ahead. Thanks for rejoining us. It's been a while.
Oh, thank you. Hi, sorry, I'm just super busy lately on Monday nights, but I wanted to come in on this. I sent you an email. I don't know. So my name is Malka Shaw. I was actually, this is just very much for me, reminding me of 9/11. I was on the front line in 9/11 as a mental health provider with the Red Cross and FEMA. And so some of the parallels that I see is that we're in real time here and we don't know what's coming next. So one of the things, there's a lot of people on this call, all different ages. I'm aging myself out because I already had my MSW by 9/11 and was already working in the field. One of the things that when we thought there was going to be another attack, like I was in the Chelsea Piers and we were ready and prepared for another attack and we didn't know it was going to be next. Right now, today, as we sit on the Zoom call, we do not know what's going to be next. So we're in real time. So just to play this like stoic, going back to Ben's, I don't know, call it Dr. Goldman or Ben's question, to stoic. No, I mean, one of my ways of being a therapist is that I'm not a psychoanalytical and I'm very much in it. And I'm very much, my clients appreciate that I'm very much human. So I sort of did a middle part of what ZC suggested is people were coming in, I took off Polaroid and I was like, hi, it's good to see you, for my firm clients. But even for I have a couple non-Jewish clients and I have like everything. And I just ended my last session with like Hasidic clients. How has the week been? Or how was your Yom Tov? And, by the way, if there's anything you want to process with the current news, this is a safe space. We can process it. And I just left that kind of like open, like this is your safe space to process it. I definitely have my countertransference and there will be, and I know this is being recorded, that the first 3 to 4 sessions, not interested in talking about it. And I was like, because I wanted to talk about it, but that's not my job to talk about it. Like what ZC said, if they don't want to talk about it. But, one of the shocking things is I had a woman who's not Jewish and it just didn't even seem like, she's like, oh, what current events? And it almost was like a dagger to my heart. And then also I have 2 Hasidic clients that came on screen. They're like, oh, we're not so involved with it. Again, a dagger to my heart, but that's my own personal countertransference. I think the thing that we have to remember is this is happening in real time. This is not, most trauma that we do in the office is in the past. We're in real time. There are people missing right now. People don't know where their kids are. People are being called on a flight in because they're being called up from the reserves. That happened. I have a client whose son is being called in. We don't know what's going to be. And I think that's a different type of trauma because we're not in past tense. It's not like EMDR, we kind of reprocess the event. We're in current event. So that's a really big piece. And I wanted to hear a little bit of what Ben was going to say about like, how are we processing this trauma in real time as we're going through it? Because I can tell you what we were told to do back in 9/11. It's 20 years old. It's more than 20 years ago. So like we have better, we have a better understanding of trauma, and we have a better understanding of how to debrief people. The time they wanted us to have them tell us every single detail.
That's a great question. Ben, talk a little bit about the real-time aspect of it.
Yeah, so I called Norman, Dr. Blumenthal, which I do a lot when I don't know stuff, which is also often. And he's brilliant. And he this was one of the things that I said, well, if you were speaking to a group like this, like what would you want to make sure not to leave out? And I asked him specifically about this, and he said, it really is, there are going to be people who just really want to talk about it. And it's something that we generally think of as not the immediate post-trauma. it's not the thing to do. It's more of recovery phase, but there really is, everybody's talking about this. It's not something that people are going to be able to avoid, and to be able to do it in the safety of our sessions and exactly the way they want to, and not hopefully get some of the unhelpful responses that they might have gotten, or just to be honest about just how terrifying things were, I think can be very helpful. I do like the I forgot the organization that puts out the mental health first aid. They have a program for more ongoing, I forgot the initials of it, but one of the modules that they have there is writing and going and being able to identify helpful things, or helpful thoughts, experiences that enabled them to get through it, things that they experience, times that they experience people being helpful. But that's really going to be, if somebody really seems like they're really still processing the initial things, that might be something to kind of give them time for.
Thank you.
I think with kids, one of the things also I think to address, but is also what's it like hearing everybody talk about it around you? If it's something that they're really upset about, and they're hearing kids talk about it. There's Tehillim, and there's the school is dealing with it in a way that relates to kids who are experiencing it from removed perspective, but they went through the sirens and they had to evacuate, and they might have been stuck in the country, so it's a very different experience for them.
Great points. Thank you. I see Devora and Rachel have their hands raised. But if you don't mind just keeping your hands raised for a little longer, if just make sure you don't lose any circulation in your arms. But I just wanted to ask you, walk us through a family. So you have a family who is returning, which is probably common. And the reason I want to look at a family is because I'm sure that there are going to be families who come back, and one member of the family will say, well, I'm really struggling, or, I'm freaked out. And the other members of the family may deny that they are, and may still be. I like to encourage, in general, I use a lot of family therapy. I think it's very effective and powerful. But if we could sit down with a family together, if we could encourage the family to come in together, walk us through the do's and the don'ts of processing this, what will help calm them down, and what should we not do?
Okay, yeah, that's a very good question. So I think one of the first things to put out there to a family is normalizing the fact that everyone's reaction is going to be different. And the same way that, or even more so, in any way, the mismatch between styles that you might have is going to be creating friction. And so there's already that worn path, but that's going to be coming out a lot more. And that might be engaging also just these well-worn patterns. So in what ways is it showing up that, you're such a baby, or however the configuration is. So there might be people for whom it really was traumatizing, and there might actually legitimately be somebody who, it doesn't really feel like it was that crazy. But especially if that was a parent or an older sibling, and they really could be giving a hard time to a kid who was really hurt by it. So creating that validation, I think related to that, not assuming there's only one way to express that, and really giving people the chance to be able to do that. It's true, we want people, parents want to know that their kids processed it, and if somebody's showing no emotion at all, or if they really are concerning symptoms that make it seem like it's a problem, we want them to take action. But otherwise, give kids for parents, give kids a chance. I think the other thing is, what is normal for a parent to be showing. So for some parents, I think it's very difficult to show emotion in front of their kids. Even I've seen families that have had very tragic losses lost a child, and the kids, they call me because the kid is having trouble 3 weeks later. And it turns out the parents never cried in front of the kids. They're not really talking about emotions all that much at all. So giving permission to a parent to show vulnerability, and if you really want to show them that they can be strong, and you want to show them that you're strong, show them that you can cry and still be okay. Don't show them that you can't handle being sad.
I'm hearing you say a lot of creating space for various reactions and emotions to be, sort of allows everybody in the room to look around and say, gee, we're all processing this in our own way, and that's all okay, because he's processing it like this, she's processing it like that, and the therapist is understanding each person's specific and personalized reaction. And so then that's okay, and mine is okay too.
Yeah, and especially if the therapist knows the dynamic, then they'll be able to look out for in what ways might this be getting derailed.
So
go ahead. I think we say hamakom yenachem eschem. We refer to God as the place. So there's a lot of wisdom in that we can go on and on. But on this level that it presents itself is time and space. God created the world with time and space. Bereshis Nami Mamar that's the first thing He created, and so giving ourselves time and space, allowing the people around us to have time and space, is important.
So you're raising a subtle point here, which is in terms of the dynamics. There may be some members of the family, for instance, who would scorn or scoff at some others' reactions, but seeing that this is being accepted and that it's acceptable kind of just derails that shame that the member who's struggling might have.
Well, yeah, hopefully. It could be that I don't know who the client here is, who's the one, how much do we know all the people, but sometimes we know that for this person it's really a lot to be able to do that. But yeah, at least there's this permission, there's this sometimes it can, when it's clear to the parent that there really is good that's coming from this, there's healing, then that can help them on their own journey. And I've seen parents in this situation exactly where just being able to be vulnerable with their own grief and shared trauma really was a big thing for them in their own movement towards being able to do that in general.
All right. Okay, so we have some of the do's here, and maybe we'll get to some of the don'ts. Let's take a pause so we can take a question from Dvorah. Go ahead, Dvorah. And thanks for raising your hand and contributing.
Hi. Okay. Yeah. So I'm not an expert in anything, but I had a training with Israel Trauma Center. And I think one thing we have to distinguish is the immediacy, where you're talking about trauma in real life, so to speak, real happening, or the immediate aftermath, and the extended trauma, which I think is more being addressed over here with your clients coming back from Israel after a few days, and they're not in the immediate period of processing, because I think you do it differently when you are actually, let's say you've gone to that bomb shelter and you're coming out of that bomb shelter, or you've experienced that loss, or Rahman al-Islam, you've seen someone being kidnapped. I can't even go into that, but you've had that trauma experience, whatever that trauma is. It's going to be a different kind of intervention you're going to utilize immediately, as opposed to a week or two down the road. In the immediate aftermath, you're gonna first of all, as the person, as the interventionist, you're gonna regulate yourself, and then you're gonna look at the other person and try to see where they're at, how stressed they feel, how safe do they feel, and you're going to ask them these questions, and then you're going to do physical. You're actually going to do, according to the trauma center work, you're going to mirror their movements, and one of the things to do to de-stress them is you're going to pace with them. You're going to get that they're activated in their limbic system. And what you want to eventually do in that intervention immediacy is to get them to be activated in the prefrontal cortex. But they're not going to listen to you if they're so agitated. So you need to walk with them and get that out of their body, kind of like shaking it out, so to speak. And at that point, then you can start asking questions, like, okay, who can you call? What do you need? Where can you get it? Maybe you need, where can you get water? What, like those kinds of things that don't require too much thinking, but get them to be more focused on goal-directed behavior that engages that prefrontal cortex. And at that point afterwards, then you have to shift the narrative. They have the trauma usually, and all the EMDR people know this too, that a lot of times trauma is processed in bits and pieces. So what you want to do, again, in that immediacy in the intervention, is get them to sequence that narrative, to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Not necessarily an end, obviously it's continuing, it's ongoing, but an end in terms of how they see their story, reframing it so that they can be like in control and competent. Because when I think your clients called you and they said, I'm really scared, they're not feeling particularly competent. And what that goal is, if you would be in Eretz Yisrael, is to get them to feel more competent, to see that continuity. And then you can normalize, what they're experiencing, which is true. And actually you probably do that before you do the narrative development. So, I mean, I think you have to distinguish between that immediate kind of in real time, or just really immediate post thing, and the longer term, which is probably what we're going to see more of in our office.
Oh, Ben?
That's a very, very important point. Yeah. A few very important points. And I mean, just as a side point, if you're an NCSP, then it's not true that you're not an expert in anything. But for the people, it's a whole different chachma, and really, there's so much more just immediate, concrete. What do you need? Let's get you stable. Let me just co-regulate and help you just be in this second. So it sounds like you've done that work also. Wow.
Okay. And it's making me think, like, when a child gets hurt and they come in sobbing and heaving, and the first thing you want to be able to do is to settle them down, calm them, bring them to room temperature before you start actually processing the story. Is that about right? Okay, let's take Rachel or Rachel. Sorry.
Yes, otherwise known as Hasia.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Okay. Hasia or Rachel. So I'm still on Zisi's remark earlier, where she said she meets people where they're at. Just wanted to add a little piece that I discovered. I'll be dating myself as well. 9/11, and also more recently with COVID, where people had different degrees of responses depending on how they were experiencing it. And what's important, I think, to recognize is that some people, unless they themselves experienced the direct trauma, when they're coming home, they may be dealing with something that to me and you seems like nothing compared to what's going on in Israel. They can be having a fight with their husband or having a child who's struggling, and it's eclipsing the current events. So I think we really do need to, when they come in, like really tune into where they really are at before we start moving into what we think they might be at. That's just the only thing I wanted to comment.
For sure. I think the consensus seems to be that we don't, we're not going to bring this up necessarily to the client and push this on them. That would certainly be, putting our own stuff on them if we need that to happen.
Yeah, and just to say that, like, also to manage our own emotions about their priorities, because it could be much more real to them, their own personal pain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, I wasted an hour and change on a webinar last night. You're gonna listen to me talk to you about Israel, okay? Yeah. But when Malka said that about, to your point, Chassi, when Malka said that about, wanting to bring it up, and I felt that, it's not very often that I feel as strong, like I need to bring this up in session. And that's a new experience for me that I have to make a note for myself going in tomorrow. I need to be looking out for that.
Yeah. Even more interesting, I should say more subtly, you're making me think of something that happened today where a client came in and I asked him, I said, walked in and I said, how you doing? And he said, well, considering all things, that are going on. And then he went into his session. And then when the next client came and he asked me how I'm doing, and I said, considering everything that's going on. And now I'm realizing now in retrospect that I actually was introducing what's going on into the session, where that may not have been where the client wanted to go at all. And that, I don't remember what happened after that, but that could have launched into a whole, discussion that's parenthetic to what the client really wanted, just because I was influenced by that. So we really have to be mindful, to be as present for the person who's in the room as we can. Okay.
Yeah.
It looks like Ben froze and then dropped out. I hope he's able to get back in because of the amount of people that are here. Okay, let's go to Rachalea. Is it okay for you to speak until he gets back in?
Sure. I want to ask a bit of a different question. Sorry, I'm a school social worker, and in a few different departments, and one of them being the preschool, the pre-1A, which is 5-year-olds, and I know the principals are gonna turn to me and say, what do we let the kids talk about? Do we hush them if they're talking about Israel? What do we say about it? What should be like the rule in the class about what they can talk about, or how much they can talk about, or, and I was just wondering maybe your perspective or Ben's perspective about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see if Ben can get back in, but right now we're at the capacity. So, unless we have a volunteer who wants to drop out, I'm wondering how he's going to get back in. Maybe I'll drop out. My initial thoughts are, when something like this is going on and it becomes a talk, it becomes a discussion, I would actually try to dedicate time. In other words, you have to let the class go. A class is also a client, right? It's a system. And we have to let them go where they're at, because if we don't, then we're sort of creating resistance. And everybody wants to be in a specific place, and I think we could all probably think back to both incidents or instances that happened when we were children in school, and teachers who dealt with this effectively and ineffectively. But when the class is stuck somewhere, something happened, the fire alarm went off in the hallway, and the teacher just wants to get back into the class and start learning again or teaching again, and the class is still rattled and frazzled, right? I imagine that the teacher's fighting an uphill battle. And what I would say was, to the contrary, let's embrace it. Let's throw it on them. Let's talk about it. Very similar, I guess, to when children want to talk about something that seems inappropriate or that's, not timely, but they saw something or heard something, and rather than distracting or turning it down, we recognize that this is something that has to happen, and lean in and say, okay, this happened. We may have not wanted to introduce this to the child at this point in his or her life, but now that it's happened, let's lean in and let's normalize it and let's discuss it. So I think, if teachers and principals are hearing the children be involved in this discussion, then let's have them encourage it and embrace it. That would be my thought. Ben's back on. So
that was ironic. Okay, thank you.
Did you get the question, or
did I get the question?
Okay, you missed the question because you got knocked down, right?
Yeah, I was at capacity. They wouldn't let me back in.
Yes,
Yeah.
we were joking about that. So Rachel was asking, what happens when kids in school are talking about it, and the principals are asking her. She's a school social worker, and the principals and the teachers are saying, should we allow the kids to talk about this, or let's try to get them out of it and distract them and talk about something else? So I gave my thoughts on it. Let's hear yours.
Yeah. So I think that's a great question. I mean, I think tomorrow most of the kids are going back. I think there's no way that the kids are going to not talk about it, which is one of the reasons we want parents to be able to speak to their kids about these types of things, because the big dumb kid on the bus is going to get to them if no one else does, and they're going to hear all these rumors or just make stuff up in their imagination. You don't want a situation where it's just taking, it's all day long, or the middle school girls are just walking through the halls, four in a row with their arms around each other and sobbing. I think to have normalcy is important, but to have some recognition that this is something going on, that you may be making yourself available to speak to them and giving them clear guidelines about when that's appropriate. I don't know if the school is addressing that directly, but that might be something to do, or speak to the teachers and help them think about how to carve out time so that there's the space for it, but that you can get back into the work of normalcy.
Ben, tell us the don'ts. So we're back with that family in the session. What are the don'ts?
Don'ts. Okay. I think one of the most powerful things that is an easy mistake to make is just overexposing our kids to whether it's videos or even just hearing people talking about things on the phone. It could be even that your own conversation is pretty measured, but that just the tone or just hearing one side of a conversation is enough to make things sound dramatic. So really being, even for ourselves, to be mindful of how much of the media we're consuming. I know that this is horrible and scary and that we don't know anything. There's not much more, I think, that I can learn about this situation personally right now that's going to change this for me. This is terrible and I'm not gaining. So yeah, I've already spoken to a few kids who have, just from watching a video, they became really, really disturbed. So that's a big thing. I think just invalidating and putting kids down for having feelings about this, for being a baby, or for there's always one kid in the family that takes things really hard, and it could be that they over dramatize and that they are in many other ways a pain to everyone around them. But yeah, it's still okay for them to have feelings about this. Those are the big ones.
I see, you're focusing a lot about children, but I think the adults are also being hit hard, in this. And what about the don'ts for the adults.
Well, the don'ts for the adults, I think, don't think that this doesn't affect you. This, especially for us, we need to be able to protect our instruments. Ourselves have to be fully available to be present in the room for our clients in the way that they need us. And if we're not tending to ourselves now, then we are coming in cloudy and we're coming in impaired. So don't slouch on the self-care and the whether it's peer consultation, taking care of yourself. Yeah, and don't forget God, I think is an important thing. It's ironic because we're saying Tehillim, and we're really, many of us, and there's a very, especially with the timing, there's a very religious context to all of it. But as a clinician also, that these are things we have to daven for, because we have somebody else in the room with us, and it's a responsibility, and it's not easy, and we need help with it, and that connection is going to be ultimately what gets us through all of this.
Yeah, we know that faith-based is a very powerful instrument in the world of mental health and emotional health. Ben, I want to ask you a tough question, an interesting dichotomy where, one of the things that's going around a lot is what you mentioned earlier is don't overexpose yourself. Don't watch too many clips. Don't disturb yourself by overexposing yourself. And, maybe to some degree guilty as charged. What if a person's coping mechanism is to expose themselves and become anxious? With some people, they need to feed off of this. They need to be in the loop and follow moment to moment, play by play. There's something comforting about creating that anxiety or whatnot. Is that something that should be discouraged and minimized, or should that be embraced too?
I've thought about the same question. I think being overexposed is relative to the person. We don't have control, and it's terrifying. And if there is a certain degree of comfort in being able to get control of the world in the way that we are used to, as trying to just keep tabs on it, but being able to be aware of when you've reached your tipping point and now it's becoming more agitating, you're adding suffering on top of the existing pain of it is the key. Not easy to discern, but I think that's the goal.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, let's take a question from a fellow Israeli, Shandel. You might not be able to tell that she's Israeli, but let's see if anyone can discern. And
No
I'm
doubt.
sure this is very personal for you. And
Yeah, everybody will know I'm Israeli. So
Now there you go.
Okay, so I have a very different kind of question. I'm working with a lot of Hebrew-speaking Israelis. How do we keep the conversation from becoming political? So, many of them, and I had a client today that she has a family member that was called up to the army, and okay, but Atem HaCharedim, it's always going back to Atem HaCharedim, are not going to the army. How do I keep on point and not, I know I'm trying, but any tips to stay clinical and not to become political?
That's a hard one to be sitting across from. I would say the most important thing is being aware of the experience of hearing that and being in touch with that. I would imagine that I would be observing a lot of intense reactions in myself if somebody was talking to me like that. And if I wasn't observing it, then they would be observing it, so being able to do that, I'd imagine if I were more psychodynamically inclined, I might want to explore that. What is it? Because that's real. What does it mean? Or if I had a stronger stomach, what does it mean for you that I'm the Haredi who is sitting out the war that's protecting you, but I think there can be some validation. It's this kind of balance, if being able to validate where, yeah, I'm not fighting your classifying me in that group, but I'm joining you and being able to be there with you in this animosity. Yeah, that's real. That's a legitimate feeling. Do you find that that people bring the conversation back, or are you able to kind of move on and just leave it there?
So it depends on the client, obviously, but some people they're stuck, like again and again. It will come up, and I say, I know it's coming from a place of anger, and I understand the anger and the worry and concern. And although really Haredim are typically or generally not in the army, we are worried and we care, but it doesn't always go through the way I want it to.
I think for someone like that, I'd welcome anybody else who has who sees this otherwise to speak up, but I think you'd have to deal with that. That seems like it's getting in the way of their being able to have benefit from you in your clinical capacity. You don't have to be the Haredi that they're thinking of. You are this person who cares deeply about them, and I think that's a trap that you might be falling into, of just feeling like you have to excuse all of the Haredim because it hits you personally. But yeah, you feel that they do that. They do that, and you're not protected by them, and yeah.
I don't think it's a trap I put myself in. I think I'm being put in, because I would say most of my clients who come to me, if they wouldn't be so desperate for a Hebrew-speaking therapist, they wouldn't come to me as a front person.
This is such a great, I love this anecdote, because it's a tremendous opportunity on your end.
Absolutely.
And if you, again, like Ben said, if you could step away from explaining or justifying and instead lean in to their anger and be very present with it, then, paradoxically, they begin to accept you more and have more faith and trust in you as a human to human versus a political party versus political party. I'm not sure that what you're describing as the client bringing up political orientation needs to actually be seen through the lens of political orientation as much as through clinical orientation. And what the client is saying is, I'm struggling right now. If it's directed towards you being Haredi, and let's say they not being Haredi, then this is your opportunity to be human and not Haredi, just human, and to be able to share with them that it must be enormously difficult to be in the presence of somebody who right now feels like the enemy on some level, and there may be so much hostility because you feel that your sons, daughters, relatives are dying on behalf of the country and mine aren't, and I wonder what that's like for you. And if they can feel held in that space, a lot of good things could happen. Frankly, if all Israelis could be held in that space, a lot of good things would happen in the country. But maybe that's a political statement. I don't know. But really,
they might be asking, like, can you care about me this much, knowing how strongly I feel about
prove
this?
Prove it to me. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, let's take our next Israeli participant. Shirley, go ahead. And I'm sure you have what I'm watching your reaction, and I'm sure you have what to say about this too.
I do. You know, this is a very mixed feeling, right? Because it's very hard to separate some of the politics in Israel from what happened, right? And my initial response, I'll be quite honest, is, you know, we're busy protecting settlers in the West Bank, and there was no IDF in the South, right? Or whatever it is, or it took people hours of response, and the rest of the politics in Israel and all the distraction, which leads us to this place. But I think it's important to separate that from individual people, but it's, you know, in the midst of the moment, it's a very difficult thing to do. And I'll be honest, my community had an event at Chabad today. This is where I came from before this training. And there was a part of me that didn't want to go. And I like the rabbi in my local community, and I go to challah bakes and other things. But because I did have that feeling of like, do I really want to go someplace where they're not serving, right? That my cousins and my cousins' children are protecting, right? Where there's no service. And I had to put that aside for a minute, and I'm really glad I did, because, you know, obviously they're really trying to help in the ways that they know how to help and bringing awareness. And it was nice to see that other side. So I would maybe suggest to also introduce some of the ways that people are helpful. I have to say that a lot of the talk about, you know, prayer and whatever was not helpful to me, because in times like this, you think about action, but what was really more helpful was templates for letters to Congress, talk about AIPAC, talk about their fundraising for Friends of IDF, and that I could really get behind, right? So I think if people can remember kind of that other side, I think it brings you a little bit closer. But I think to ignore the politics in Israel and the direct impact of the division is foolish.
Thank you.
And that really shapes the experience of whoever we're speaking to. That is this for them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And we hope to see you on again. Okay, ID.
I keep on putting on my hands and putting down and putting on and putting down, because at some point people cover what I was going to say or share. I'm also from Israel. And obviously this is, you know, very close to home. I wanted to say about something about what you brought up before, the constant need of checking the media and everything. I think people don't look to know this stuff to get more anxious. I think the reason why people obsessively look is the need of control. And when we can acknowledge what's under the need of searching all the time, what's happening, and constantly being in the media and constantly understanding what's going on, is to get to the point where the person can identify, I'm trying to look for control. And unfortunately, right now, none of us have control of what's happening. Not even us. Who knows what's going to be tomorrow in America? Like, nobody's safe. And so finding places where her person can find control in the uncontrollable craziness that we're going on. And when they can find a way of controlling other things that are possible, then I think the need of checking all the time can be reduced and, you know, be more balanced with a functional day. I want to go back to what Shandy said.
Can I just say that was a beautiful, beautiful point. Thank you for that. Excellent point.
Thank you. I want to go back to what Shandy said.
I really have to jump in. I apologize, because I respectfully disagree with the control point, because I think for me, it's more like I have to know what's going on, because I want to feel I'm sitting here comfortable in America, and I want to feel for the people in Israel. So I don't feel like I want to be in control.
There's a difference between wanting to see and between putting yourself into constantly checking to a way that you cannot anymore function normally at your day. I'm not saying don't look at all. I'm just saying finding the balance between needing to be controlling, to control the situation, and between being aware of what's going on and being a part of it.
Okay, great distinction.
And I want to say I agree also. I mean, I've been obsessively watching TV, well beyond information, watching over and over the same thing. And for sure, there's a control thing at play because I feel very helpless.
But
So
I
go ahead, Ben.
what Shandel was saying, I mean, I really, I can relate to that. And, you know, for me, this might not resonate with everybody, but for me, you know, if that's what's driving me, then opening up a Tehillim, you know, saying a short, feel like Hashem, you know, that's, then I feel like, okay. And then that brings me back to what I was saying, like, I have no control. Like, I'm just give this to you and
Right. So it sounds like you know the consensus is, I think, like Idi's saying, that if you're obsessing over it, then it's you've gone beyond Imcha Anochi B'Tzara, right?
Yeah,
And
it's going far beyond, and people are really suffering because they get to a point where they can't even get the dinner done for the kids or get to work, or like it's really getting to a hard place. It's not, you know. So
Idi, I wanted you to jump to a second point because we have another very special person waiting to talk.
I was gonna say to Shindy, I think she was saying about like when we get into a defensive mode with the clients, it's already putting us in a friendly, politically whatever conversation versus professional client therapy. And it's okay that the client is venting about whatever they vent, and that's their truth, and to be there and to validate their truth and what they go through with the anger, with whatever it is, and to just be there and support it and continue to explore it as just without being emotionally attached to it, and to just talk about it from, so what does it make you feel when the Haredim, that, you know, just talking like that without putting yourself into a part of this conversation.
Right. And I agree with you, and I just want to acknowledge that, you know, what was said before, both from Shandel and I forgot who, if it was Shirley or somebody else, that being put in that position in session when you're at the direct attack, you know, is definitely something that's difficult to navigate, you know, and of course that is our job, but it does.
It comes up also, like as a Jewish, when you see non-Jewish, right? It can come up when a client tells you Jewish people, whatever. I've had that before, you know, and you just have to learn to breathe a minute and to this not be emotionally involved right now, and to see the client for the client and not as a battle between Jews and non-Jews, or like Haredi and not Haredi and all that.
Yeah, thank you, Idi. Okay, our next participant who's going to contribute is Julie. Julie, tell us a little bit about where you are right now and why this is so special for us.
Well, you can take a look. I'm outside my shelter in my home. I'm in the Yerushalayim, Jerusalem area. I've been a mental health professional here for many years here in Israel. I came late to this almost, so I'm repeating things. I just have a couple comments. The usual Israeli recommendations is not to watch all these images because it can increase, it imprints in your mind and can increase PTSD. Do people watch it? And they do, but they don't. But everyone has their own approach. I would also like to comment on Shandel and the question. People see me, just can decide what they see me as. I just myself as Shomer Mitzvot. There are sometimes people, it's a counter-transfer institute, and there are people who just can't see me. In other words, I've worked for years on a health plan, so they don't know who they're getting, and they see me, and some people have reactions, and it's not workable, and I say that's fine. I think, well, let's figure out what you need, and I'm trying to refer to Ali. There's a big switch, and Shana, I'm not sure if you're here in Israel now, but basically there is such a big switch from last week, just in the political thing, of people who were television on different sides of the Mechitza, literally, those for, against, or different protests. But it is amazing to see, and I did see this, the images on Motzei Chag, which was Saturday night. Yeah. That the same people, you can see how they're dressed, and I don't know if they really were the same people who were dressed a certain way. They would, on Shabbat, they were donating blood in Tel Aviv. They were giving all food and all kinds of clothing and things what soldiers needed. There's a whole switch right now. We still disagree with our 12 tribes of one nation. And that's really what's going on. I mean, people are just helping each other. That's it. The other thing is my personal recommendation is about information. Figure out how you get your information, but not be overwhelmed. There's not one answer. I can just say I have a phone with alerts, and I know what I need to know. I mean, certainly have the sirens and everything. I get the alerts and whatever. But it's you can't deny it's really bad, and that's really and it's been, we know it's going to get worse. But there are places to get information. That's something else very important. Get a reliable source of information. I mean, here we have sources, both in terms of how to cope and just facts, information. Whenever there's a crisis, you need facts. So here there is the Home Front Command as an app. It's very helpful, giving detailed things for different situations. Can't cover everything.
Am I the only one not hearing her?
It's a little bit hard to hear. I'm getting most of what she's saying, but
Okay.
there's a lot of echo from the shelter.
Yeah. Okay, is it better now?
Yeah.
Hello? Is it better now? Okay.
It's better.
Okay,
There we
so
go.
basically, just, get information, and it's very helpful to know, to help clients in a practical way when they have their information. And then sometimes you have to step out of the intellectual therapist mode. But anyway,
Right.
that's it. I
Well,
can just
thank you. Good luck there.
We're a
right.
strong country here.
Okay, is there a particular reason that you're in the shelter tonight?
Oh, because my location, I have 90 seconds to get to the shelter. I cannot, it's in my home, but I cannot get there in 90 seconds. So if this alert goes off, I'm right outside my shelter, actually. If alert goes off, I can't make it in 90 seconds. It's certainly not if I'm asleep at night. So it's like 5 a.m. So therefore, at night, that's where I can.
Well, we want to thank you for joining at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning over there,
Yeah.
and giving us, the sentiment on the ground.
Yeah, but the other thing is we love the people all over the world. I mean, we feel very supported in that, whatever people are doing. Because we, as I said, we are 12 tribes from one nation.
Yep. Okay. Ben, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so meaningful to hear the experience from there, and certainly, it's a layer, it's so hard to really grasp exactly what it's like for the people who really are going through it. We can kind of feel as connected as we can, but to hear it directly from you is meaningful. Somebody else also mentioned Rachel Berger, that's
Passy.
not Rachel. Yeah, thank you. But the Survivor's Guild, that's something that I was thinking of before, that, for people who are leaving Israel and leaving a kid behind in yeshiva, or leaving a sister, or even just leaving Eretz Yisrael, and in the time, they went there for a reason. It's a meaningful place. That might be something that people are struggling with.
Yeah. So that's a great point. That's a great point. And how do we help them to process that? Just plain old, good old fashioned processing.
Yeah, therapy, man. Process it with them. It's real. The feelings are real, and it doesn't mean that it's rational, but it doesn't have to be for it to be upsetting to you. Yeah, I think also just gauging how much that's affecting them. If they're really, it's might be tied up with just their anxiety about the child there, and that's something that really, somebody that I'm thinking of, I'm imagining they're going to be coming in tomorrow. They were already very anxious about the kid, and so this is really going to be something complicated. So seeing it in the bigger clinical picture also.
I want to have a very special appreciation to Julie for doing this, because now that I'm just playing back some of what she said, and sort of experiencing it myself, what I'm noticing is that there's so many things that we don't even think about. I mean, the idea of the distance from your apartment to your shelter, and that you have to be worried about that. You have to be, that's a new anxiety that I never would have thought of. You think about cars exploding and things exploding and people running, but who thinks about somebody not being able to get down fast enough to the shelter in the right amount of time? And that's these little anxieties that could keep a person up all night. And what is that? Where does that leave you, that you can't actually sleep in your apartment at night? So what are you doing?
Yeah.
And how are you living when you can't live a normal life? And what that's like for people who just, so many minuscule details of their lives are affected.
It's such a contrast. We're coming out of, leaving our comfortable dwellings to go in this place where we recognize we're being completely protected by Hashem, and it's all besimcha, and not appreciating that at this very moment there are people who can't sleep in their own bed because they're too far away from the
Just
shelter.
can't make it down to the shelter fast enough. It just gives us a little taste.
Yeah.
Although Ben, the amount of books I see in the background, you probably could stay in that room for quite some time.
I have 3 weeks worth of books. Yeah. Or 3 days, or is that what they that's what I'm thinking back to another webinar, the woman was speaking about how she got this notification they need 3 days worth of water and 3 days worth of food, and then she recognized it was this like standard notification, but that initial lurch. Yeah.
Okay. It's almost time for closing, but I'm wondering if there's anything that anyone feels we may have not covered or missed that you want to bring up before we close. Any questions, comments, or thoughts? I'm sure there's more. If we'd be speaking to more people on the ground, I'm sure it would be a whole different discussion. This is really a conversation about how should we prepare ourselves to debrief people who are coming back to the United States or wherever we are, and just processing some of the little snippets of things that they experience there, of anxieties and sights that they may have experienced. And some of the anxieties may be as simple as we didn't know how we were going to get back, or we were stranded. And that itself could be very scary, especially for people with abandonment issues, but even for anyone. I mean, just thinking of my friend who reached out to me, we started this whole conversation about, who's like, I don't know how we're going to get back. And when we get back, I want to talk, that brings up something for me. How are you going to get back? What's that like for you? So any other things that we may have missed? Heidi, go ahead.
Just gonna say, we forget there is so many Americans who actually are in that trauma too. Like my friend today just called me up and she's like, my husband is gone. He's a reserved soldier, and he's gone. And now she's home with 3 children, and now she's the one in trauma, now she needs the help. So it's like, I feel like it's a nation. It's a nation trauma.
A national, yeah, sure, absolutely. Shirley.
I would just say to really consider who's in front of you. There's a lot of talk about prayer and Hashem and some of that stuff. And this is coming from a person who went to yeshiva. Personally, for me, that's not what I would want to hear. So really, to be really careful, right? Because sometimes in times of crisis, I don't care about thoughts and prayers. I really care about action in situations of crisis. I know that, and I respect the fact that that's not everyone's stance, but to really be careful about who you're talking to. Just because I'm Jewish, or just because I went to yeshiva, or just because I know the verbiage, or I know how to pray, doesn't mean that that connects for me. And just being careful about who's in front of you when you're having those suggestions for coping.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I think the discussion is really for those who bring it up and, you know, are asking about it or have used it as a coping mechanism in the past, you know, for them to be able to have an anchor. And
Sure.
for other people, it may be just thinking about their parents or something else. But for many, you know, that's what they turn to. Absolutely. For some not, sure. Okay. Ben, any final thoughts?
I just want to thank you for creating this space and for allowing me to be a part of it, and all the people who spoke up. I really benefited from this, and I appreciated the opportunity.
Absolutely, and we appreciate that you came on. A special thank you to the Israelis and those in Israel right now who contributed and shared some more, I guess, closer sentiments and thoughts, and respectfully, and I greatly appreciate that. And then to the others who shared their experience and expertise and thoughts and concerns and worries, and you know, on behalf of myself and hopefully everybody in here, we are as with you as we possibly can be, even if you can't see us and feel us. We're worrying, we're contributing in our own ways, whether it's financially, with prayer, with thoughts, with you know, I again personally have, I'm going to say, dozens of relatives in Israel now, but some very, very close ones, including at least 15 to 20 nieces and nephews and brothers-in-laws and sisters-in-law, and etc. So we're very much, you know, in it as closely as we can be, short of going down there and joining, you know, picking up a gun and joining the battle. So, you know, you're in our thoughts and prayers, and love to everybody. Okay. Well, thank you everybody, and hope to see you next week. Good night. Bye-bye. Let's hear good news soon. And for anybody who wants to now unmute